So I have dreaded this episode and I have put it off and I've put it off, but I think I'm finally ready to record it. It's going to be hard for me, but I hope that the process will help you. This episode is about something that has happened in my personal life in the last few months. It was something I was very excited to share with you, and then suddenly I realized I was not going to be able to share it with you in that way. And if you haven't figured it out yet, it's my own personal story of miscarriage. So sit tight. I'm going to tell you my story, the ironies of my story, the way God kind of laid things out for my story. And that's really it. Let's dive in. Are you a Christian woman yearning for a beautiful, joyful pregnancy and birth with a focus on God, not medical tests? Are you worried the birth you want isn't possible and you're tired of being treated like an accident waiting to happen? Hey mama, I'm Lori, host of Your Birth God's Way. I'm a certified nurse midwife now, but I wasn't always. After working for nearly 20 years in the broken maternity system, I too was in your shoes wondering how I could have the birth I wanted and that I felt God meant for me to have. I found a secret that has actually been known since the beginning of time. God's way is the best way. Spoiler alert, God made us and our babies, and He knows us best. He designed us perfectly for pregnancy, birth, and nourishing our babies after birth, if we work with His design and not against it. In this podcast, you'll learn how to be healthy and have joy during this time of life that will be over before you know it. So if you're ready to reclaim your birth and your babies for His glory, go turn on a few episodes of Bluey for that little one on your hip so you can put the focus back on you for a few minutes with me. So today I'm not going to do a review because it just doesn't feel right. This is not a fun episode for me. I'm not looking forward to it, but I want to share it with you for two reasons. One, I want you to just kind of see what the picture looks like sometimes, because while I did an episode on miscarriage back in March, it was at that point theoretical. And it also wasn't the storyline, the timeline. And I just thought it would help some of you to kind of hear the timeline, to hear how things can progress and work out. Thing two is there have been some things that I have decided to do with my practice since then as a result of this story. And it won't make sense and the dots won't connect if I don't tell you the story. So this week, I'm going to tell you this story of what has happened to me. And then I'm going to next week talk to you about what that's led to and what I've decided to do as a result. Okay. So this usually you probably notice every now and then I'll be looking at the computer. I usually have a nice little outline already. Today I have sticky notes. I just jotted down some dates to try to remember because I'm just going to try to remember and just kind of talk you through the story and what happened and all the things. Okay. So, um, I don't really want to say there's a trigger warning on it. I mean, obviously, I'm talking about a loss. So, that brings with it what it brings with it. If this is not the episode for you, totally understand. But I hope it will help you. Okay. So let me go back and share with you the good part first, the happy part when this all first happened. So, and let me lead into this by saying I'm 43 years old. I'm advanced maternal age, right? So this was all rather unexpected. You kind of assume and think that maybe you're past that phase in life, and then you find out that, oh, maybe you're not. So, I had my last period started on January the 28th. And a few episodes ago, I went through with you figuring out how to figure out your due date and all that stuff. And of course, on January 28th, I had no idea what would be happening in that next month. So January 28th was the first date of my last period. And then let me try to think. I wrote the date down wrong. I actually wrote down I think probably around the conception date, not the date that I figured out. So fast forward almost exactly 4 weeks. Um, I remember I got up and went to the bathroom that night and I came back to the bed super nauseous. And I was like, why in the world do I feel so sick to my stomach? And as I laid there, it dawned on me, uh-oh. I mean, it was like a weird nausea. It wasn't like I'm sick, you know what I mean? And so the next morning I took a test and sure enough got that faint little line. I was actually by myself that day. My kids were at my mother-in-law's. My husband was gone working. And so I was by myself to sit with that news. Of course, being me, I wasn't quite convinced. Well, I was convinced. I knew from all the symptoms and everything, but I wanted to see more. So I waited 48 hours, took a first thing in the morning test, and it was blazing. So it was pretty good indication, shall we say. I don't remember if it was that day or a few days later, I decided to run some labs just to make sure. Get the HCG, which is the human chorionic gonadotropin. That's the test that, I mean, that's what the urine test actually looks for, but the blood test does an actual number, an actual count. And so I just wanted to run that. So I did. And I also wanted to see that before I started telling people, especially, I can't remember if I did it before I told my husband or after, but I just wanted to know. And so I did that. Everything looked great. Numbers were where you would expect them to be, all that good stuff. So it was happening, right? So we're at the end of February. I tell my husband, he is in disbelief at first. And when you're in your 40s and you just don't expect that news, right? So I told him, and he wanted me to not tell anybody for at least a week or so. And I think that there was wisdom there, obviously, on one hand, because he didn't want to tell people and then find out something had happened, which, as you know, by the title of the episode and everything, something did happen. But that's just kind of a man thing, too. It's like you're protective, you're protecting your wife, you're wanting to be a little bit more sure, all those things. And so we waited another, I don't know, week or so before we told the kids. And that was a funny story. I have a great video of it. My older two sat there and accused us both of lying as if we would make that up. They're like, you're lying, and all that. They did not believe us at all. And then once they did figure it out, they weren't happy. I don't know what that was all about. Well, I kind of do, but they're 11 and the 11 and 9-year-old were not excited about it. And I think what they thought was I was going to give birth to an annoying 7-year-old because my youngest just gets on their nerves, right? And so I think in their head, a new sibling meant that they were going to have somebody irritating them instantly. I don't think they even fully processed the fact that this is going to be a baby. And honestly, by the time this baby would be, 7, 8 years old, when they're really getting into that kind of annoying potential phase, they would be, about to move out of the house. I don't think they put all that together, but whatever. The 7-year-old was ecstatic. She was over the moon. She was the one through this whole story that was so excited and was in my corner through the whole thing, which was pretty cool. So told them, and then started telling people at church. Decided, okay, well, at this point, by the way, by the time I told them at church, I'm trying to look at the dates here. I told them at church around the 23rd or 4th, whatever that Sunday was of March. And so by this point, I had known almost a month, and it felt like I had waited forever, and if you've ever, kind of walked that line of who do you tell, what do you tell, all that kind of stuff, um, it feels like you're waiting forever. So it was a full month of waiting. And then I finally started telling them. Well, wouldn't you know it, I told them on that Sunday, and not everybody, but just some people that were a little closer to me. Told them on that Sunday, and then on the Tuesday or Wednesday following that, I think it was Tuesday, was the first time I noticed spotting. Okay, so just to watch the flow of the timeline, first period was January 28th. Conception was probably somewhere around February 11th or 12th or so, somewhere around in there, maybe a little bit before, maybe as early as like the 8th, that little window there. You never know the exact date that you ovulate, but looking at a few signs, I think I guessed it was somewhere between the 8th and 10th, I think it was. Um, and then fast forward to finding out that again, I didn't write this date down, the last or 28 days from January 28th. Was that like 24th or 5th or 6th or something like that? Um, and then telling people at church was around the 23rd, 24th. Okay. So this is, it feels like it's been forever when you're the one excited about it and can't talk to anybody. But so I finally tell people, and then the spotting starts on the 26th, I believe it was. So, um, obviously, as a midwife, I automatically, kind of start freaking out a little bit. But then I also know how many people that I have seen who had spotting and everything ended up being fine. There's other things that can cause spotting besides miscarrying. And so, as you know, as I talked you through in the other episode, which ironically, I posted the episode, these are one of the ironies I was going to talk about. I posted that episode about miscarriage on March the 4th, I believe. And I think I recorded it just a couple days before. And as I worked out the timeline, I might have been that the time that my baby stopped growing, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit more about this in a minute. The time my baby started growing was probably right around then. I'm just going to go ahead and follow this train of thought, and then I'll get back on the timeline. I remember thinking as I was recording that, because as I was recording it, I knew I was pregnant. I didn't tell anybody on the podcast, obviously, but I knew. And I remember thinking, I hope I'm not recording this for me. I hope I'm not recording this for me. I hope that this is not something I'm going to have to learn from. And turns out I was recording it for me. I had just refreshed all my knowledge from that. It was all right there in my mind, fresh. And yeah, so just 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I guess, the spotting started. Okay, so that day, I believe it was, no, I'm sorry, on Wednesday morning, I drew a couple of labs. I drew an HCG. Remember, I told you I drew the HCG on the front end. So I had that starting point, and then I drew another HCG. Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about HCG. Again, that's the human chorionic gonadotropin. That particular hormone, and I may have mentioned this in that episode from March the 4th. That hormone, if your pregnancy is progressing progressing normally, it will usually double in about 48 hours. Okay, so it goes up really fast through, the first trimester or so. Then it starts to come back down. So it shoots up. So, if your HCG is 100 today, and it would be 100 very early in pregnancy, but if it's 100 today, by 48 hours from now, it should be 200. And then 48 hours from then, 400. And then 48 hours from then, 800, and so on. So it goes up really fast. And so my HCG, when I drew it, was 17,558. That's the exact number. And I thought, well, that's not too bad. But my progesterone was 5. And I'll tell you in a minute that HCG actually wasn't good. I'm going to work that through a little bit for you too. And this, by the way, this is more information than most of you need. But for those of you who really want to understand it, I'm trying to help you. Okay. My progesterone was 5 and 5.1, I think. And below 5 is considered incompatible with pregnancy. Like it's supposed to be like 25 at least. And so that was what I reacted to. I thought, oh no, my progesterone's low. That's why I'm spotting. This is me trying to rationalize and tell myself that no, I'm not really miscarrying. Maybe if I do something about that progesterone, it'll get better. And so I contacted one of my friends who's an MD and could prescribe for me, and had a televisit with her, got a prescription, took it, hoping that that's going to make a difference, right? Didn't do anything with HCG at that point. Just looked at it and thought 17,000, that's great. That's really high. That's good. So I just think I have a progesterone issue right now. Okay, so fast forward to Friday. Now bear in mind, I'm thinking in the back of my head that if I'm thinking about the main thing I'm worried about is if it should be ectopic. And I can't remember exactly what put that in my head. I want to say it was the low progesterone. When I get back into my reading, that low progesterone, sometimes your HCG will continue to go up, but your progesterone won't be as high. And I was just looking at all these different things, trying to piece it all together. So I was worried about an ectopic pregnancy, which is where the pregnancy implants somewhere besides the uterus, so like in a tube or something like that. And on Friday, I was doing laundry, and I remember I had these weird, odd symptoms. Like my heart was racing. I kept thinking my kids are going to find me passed out on the floor. I felt, I don't like just kind of lightheaded, nauseous, weird. And I thought every now and then, ectopics will present without pain. And I thought, what if I have an ectopic and I'm bleeding and that's why I feel like this, and I just ignore it. So I was about to be at the 48-hour mark from that last set of labs. So on Wednesday, I drew the labs. I think it was around lunchtime. I was about to be at the 48-hour mark where I was planning on drawing them again. That's going to be important in the next episode. I was almost to the point. I was planning on drawing them again, which would have been at 48 hours. And I just said, I told my husband, I said, something's wrong. I need to go get checked out. Um, I just felt like something was wrong. And I know that gut feeling for so many has led to them catching things. And so I just didn't want to ignore it. And so my mom came and got my kids. Me and my husband went to the local hospital and I got checked out. So they ran some labs and I forgot to bring my labs with me here. They're at home. I'm at my office, but the progesterone ended up, I mean, I'm sorry, they didn't draw the progesterone right then. The HCG ended up being, I want to say 18,000 something. So it had gone up, but bear in mind that had been 48 hours and it had not nearly doubled. It should have been, if it was 17,000 before and it was progressing normally, that should have been what, 34,000? Nowhere near that. And so this is, further confirming that things are not going normally. But here's what's interesting too, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this in here and then I'll go into it more in the next episode. And I'm sorry if this is kind of bouncing around, y'all. I'm trying to piece it all together. And when you tell stories, how things come back and forth. Forgive me for that. When I first got there and I told them I was afraid I was having an ectopic and I told them what my symptoms were, I guess they thought I was having a cardiac event because the first thing they did when they got me back in the ER was do an EKG. And if I had been thinking, I would have told them no. And I will flesh that out a little bit more on the cost of that, the actual physical cost of, the monetary cost of that, because that was something that they did just to cover their rear ends that I did not need. And so that was the first thing they did was an EKG, which was, of course, totally normal. Then they sent me for an ultrasound, which I, of course, expected. The ultrasound tech was an older lady. And, if you've ever been to get an ultrasound for like your anatomy scan, they usually have big screens up where you can see the pictures well, or they'll turn the monitor right next to you to where you can lay there and see what they're doing. But this lady, as I'm laying down, imagine if you're watching on YouTube, I'm trying to describe this, but imagine you're laying flat on your back and the screen was like just at my face or at the end of my face pointing towards her. So there was no way that I could see it at all. And I asked her if she could turn it, and she said she wasn't allowed to. And I thought, well, isn't that nice? So everything she was doing, I couldn't see. And so she does a few different scans. And then what's interesting is she wouldn't tell me anything. She wouldn't let me look. But then, I don't know, a few minutes in, I don't know how long it had been, she says, now what made you think you were having an ectopic? And I thought, the only reason somebody would say it like that is if it wasn't an ectopic. She is now seeing that the baby is not ectopic. And I thought, and so the next thing I said, first of all, she didn't think she was telling me anything, right? But and I already told her I'm a midwife. I know what I'm looking at. Can I please look? I know what I'm looking at. Please let me watch. She wouldn't. But so the fact that she said it that way, I knew it was an ectopic at that point, which was good. That was a relief. But I told her, I said, if it's not ectopic and you see that everything is okay, can you please make this shorter? Because I don't really trust the safety of first trimester ultrasounds. You all already know that about me, right? We talked all about that. And so she did. And I had the transabdominal first, and then she had done a transvaginal. And I think she was doing the transvaginal maybe when I said that. And she didn't tell me she was ending it for that reason. But apparently she cut it short. I found this out later. And so she goes over in the corner to do her thing. I stand up to start getting dressed. And I turn and look at the monitor that she told me I couldn't look at. And she has a view up of all of the different still shots she had taken. And I noticed as she was going through, she was freezing it a bunch. She was taking a lot of pictures. And I thought, why is she taking so many pictures? Is everything okay? And as I turn around, I can see evidence of the baby and I start crying. My husband's in there with me, but he didn't, he saw the screen a little bit. For some reason, she let him look, but not me. Of course, he had no clue what he was looking at. So I get upset because I realize that, I'm seeing my baby on the screen. We go back to the ER room, and the doctor comes in and tells us what she had found, that it was not ectopic, which of course I'd already figured out, but that it looks like the baby had stopped growing about 2 weeks prior, about 6 weeks. I was supposed to be 8 weeks at this point. It looked like the baby was about 6 weeks. And, but they couldn't diagnose a miscarriage. They thought I needed to follow up in 2 weeks. I mean, excuse me, 1 week, 7 days. And that alone, in retrospect, as I look back, did me no justice because they did not see a heartbeat. And they were like, well, maybe we just missed it. You don't just miss it. And what I've learned since then, and again, I'll detail this a little bit more next week, but basically, if you see a fetal pole, meaning you see a teeny tiny little baby in there, by the time you can see a fetal pole, you see a heartbeat. That's how early it starts. And so the fact that the measurements showed that the baby was really more like 6 weeks, the fact that there was no heartbeat, and the fact that my HCG had only gone up 1,000 completely fits the picture of this baby is not going to make it, or it's not alive now. In fact, it wasn't alive then because it had no heartbeat. But they didn't tell me that. And they sent me home and basically just to wait and see, and then have a follow up in 7 days. So I get home and I start pouring through the data, analyzing, looking at measurements, looking things up, and I start to kind of figure out the story and realize what's really happening that they didn't tell me, despite the incredibly expensive bills that I'm going to tell you about. I've got one of them right here that I'm going to go through with you next week. But despite how much they charged me for this visit, that they didn't really help me all that much, other than to tell me it wasn't an ectopic. They couldn't even just give me the dignity of telling me, looks like your baby's gone. So, this is where being a midwife came in handy a little bit because I was able to navigate it a little bit better. I got home, I went through the numbers, I did my own calculations. I figured out that no, I really had already miscarried. And when I say miscarried, the baby had already died, but the baby was still on the inside. But I knew that what was coming. And so I didn't continue like taking progesterone. I quit all that. I knew what was coming and I just waited. And that was starting on March 28th. Um, and then fast forward to, I guess it was April the 1st. Fast forward to April the 1st, and my sister was supposed to be coming to see me on the 2nd. And there were no signs of anything progressing. And I started to worry because, and I've told y'all about worrying, right? But I started to look at a calendar and realize the baby had been gone for 2 whole weeks prior. And now we were at almost another week. So we're pushing 3 weeks. And I started to be concerned that I might develop an infection because the baby was still in there, and no signs of anything happening. So I decided to take the Cytotec route that I had talked to you guys about in the episode about miscarriage. So I decided to do that. I'm not going to go into all the details of that, but that was the moment that I went through with it was one of the worst of the whole thing. I again waited till I was at home alone because I didn't want to be all, in lots of pain and bleeding and everything like I had read would happen with my kids home. And what's interesting is that you hear me say, as I read what happened, because even as a midwife, I'd not been through it myself. So I really didn't know what to expect. All I had was other people's stories. So I went through with it and I waited. I just laid there and waited. Just laid there and waited. Just laid there and waited. And about an hour later, when nothing had happened, I decided, all right, well, I'm going to get up. And so I got up, and like I said, my sister was coming the next day. I actually didn't feel that bad. So I just started cleaning. I started cleaning my basement because that's where she was going to stay. I started just kind of, tidying up some different things or whatever. And nothing ever really happened. barely cramped any. Bleeding didn't pick up. It was like nothing. And which is interesting because a lot of people who do Cytotec, I mean, they get in bad shape. They bleed a lot. They're in lots and lots of pain. And none of that ever happened for me. Um, so fast forward to the next day. I mean, we go through the whole night, nothing ever happens. And my sister's on the way. And I was texting with my midwife and, talking about how like the bleeding was like next to nothing. And I'm like, well, maybe I missed it. Maybe it's out. I don't know what happened, but maybe it's out. And forgive me for this. You're about to get major TMI, but I like when I'm pregnant and stuff, I tend to check my own cervix. I just do. I know I tell you not to let them check you, but I know where it's at. I'm very familiar with it. I know how to get to it. It's not hard to check for me. And so I was also checking at this point because I assumed that my cervix would open a little bit to let anything out. And so this is what's interesting. And this is like one of those, I think this is one of those God things where like I just did this and I don't even know why I did it. So I stuck my finger in there to see if my cervix was open, and it really wasn't. And I just kind of like felt around the outside of it. And when I took my finger out, there was a large clot. It's about that big. And for some reason, like I almost just wiped it off in toilet paper because I thought it was just a clot. But for some reason, I thought, I'm not going to do that. And I went to the kitchen and just got a little mason jar and put it in there and just put some saline on it. And I sat it down and I don't remember what I did next. And then I looked at it a little bit later, and sure enough, that was my baby. Um, and it looked like everything that you may have seen in any books about what a 6-week-old baby looks like. Yep. And had I wiped that off on a piece of toilet paper and just put it in the toilet, I never would have seen my baby. But it was a blessing to me. Some of you might not want to see that, but to me it was a blessing. I got to see my child. Even if it was this big and looked nothing like a human, I got to see it. And so that was that. And like I said, I'm thankful for that. It was for me, like when I go through things like this, I kind of nerd out a little bit, not in a good way, but like I just want to know. This is like an opportunity to me. Like it's an awful loss. I was very sad. But when do you ever get to see a 6-week baby to where you can actually look at what it looks like at that point in development? Um, to see all the things God has already done at that point in that baby. And so I got to do that. What's interesting is the pain and the bleeding and all that got worse after the baby was out. In fact, I remember that night after my sister had gotten there, I was cooking, or maybe the next day actually. I can't remember. I was cooking, and I remember I was bent double at the stove because it was like I was in labor. It hurt so bad. Um, and yeah, so I also had something else pass. And again, this is too much information for most of you, but in case this happens to you, I want you to have heard it. I had something pass that, like, it was again a fluke. And y'all, I'm telling you, if you're grossed out by stuff, this is not the episode for you. So sorry. You're welcome to stop it right now. I went to the bathroom and I looked in the toilet after I got up, and I'd already wiped. The toilet paper was there, and I looked down and there was something. It just kind of looked like a pool of blood. I was like, that's weird. Wonder what that is. And I stuck my finger in the toilet. Again, you can think I'm gross. Think whatever you want to. Judge me if you want to. I'm fine. I'm trying to help those of you who want to know or who might see this. And I touched it and it was fleshy. And I was like, what in the world is that? And I took it out and it was about this long. It honestly looked like to me, do you remember those tampons they used to have? Maybe they still have them. That were called OB, and they didn't have applicators. It was just the tampon. It looked about that size. And it was just fleshy and squishy. And I thought, well, is that my placenta? Maybe that's my placenta. So I texted my doctor, and she said it's probably what's called a decidual cast because your placenta was so small at this point. It's like not even going to be a thing that you're going to probably even notice. But a decidual cast is basically like a casting, like exactly what you would think of a cast of the inside of your uterus. It's like a form of it. And apparently that's what it was. It was just rolled up. Um, So that was another little interesting thing. And I only tell you that so that if you see something like that, you don't have to freak out and think, some of your organs have fallen out. Okay. It's nothing bad. It's just kind of an interesting thing. Some people have it happen after periods. It just, like there's like a form of their uterus that kind of comes out. Just all, it's like it all sheds off instead of coming off in pieces and clots and that kind of things. It comes off all in one piece together. And so that came out. And really after that, it was pretty much over. So it's been hard. It has been very difficult. And let me pause real quick and say, bear in mind, this all happened before that 7-day rescan that they wanted me to do in the ER. So I went through all these things without ever having the official diagnosis, even though they had all of the diagnostic criteria to tell me that I had already miscarried. I went through all these things going home with false hope, thinking that maybe in a week it'll be okay. And then having to go through all this. If I had not been a midwife and figured it all out, I might not have known what was happening. Okay, I just want to add that in there. But back to kind of how it's been very hard. I feel like it was only real to me. I feel like um, my husband, bless his heart, it wasn't real to him, and it wasn't. I mean, in his defense, like to any man's defense, like until they see evidence of it, until your belly starts getting big and they can feel kicks and stuff, it's not real. It doesn't seem real. The only child that has really continued to ask me questions, as you can imagine, is the 7-year-old. She asked me about the baby. She wanted to see the baby. She's the only one that wanted to see it. She wanted to see the baby. She even 2 nights ago asked me to look at pictures again because see what I did was I got out one of my books that has all kinds of different pictures of babies in their various development, and I had showed her some of that, and she wanted to see it again. So she's really the only one that even still talks about it. So I've realized it, I think I said this in that episode back in March, but it's very lonely. Um, People don't know what to say to you. It's not real to them because it was so early, and they tend to think that it's just, oh, it'll be fine. Now, the people who have felt it the most are the ones who've had miscarriages as well. The ones who've had the best things to say and given me the most hugs are the ones who have lost babies before. Um, and so that's been helpful. One very, very sweet lady, I'll show you this necklace. I don't know if you can see it on YouTube, but it's like a heart with a little circle on the inside. A sweet sister of mine, sister in Christ from church, gave me a big old memory box, and this was inside of it. And inside, it's like a box to keep. And the necklace was on a large holder thing and had a really sweet note in there. I wear this almost all the time. And so there's been some really sweet things. And I don't know if she's had a loss before or not, but it's just kind of interesting to me that the ones who understand most, of course, are the ones who have gone through it before themselves. It's a very lonely thing because most people don't even know you're going through it. And let me just take a second to say, I do not regret telling people, even though it was a quick up of telling people and everybody's so excited, and then a quick right back down of having to say, hey guys, something's going on. And I don't think I said that. I texted because, we were at church on Sunday when I told the people that I told. And then Wednesday night we had Bible study, and I texted them Wednesday. I made a group message of all the people I could think of that I had told. And I said, see, y'all probably don't get this on the podcast, but I'm a big jokester. Like I pick and joke and everything all the time. And so, it was a little joke with some of them that I'm old and I'm having a baby. I mean, y'all can see this gray hair. Um, and so, me being a jokester, I expect jokes, I can take jokes, but I didn't want them to come in being too jovial, because I wasn't sure how I would react. I didn't want to be ugly. I didn't want to cry. And so I had texted them all, told them what was going on. So there's some spotting. Everything's probably okay, but we really don't know. So if we can just kind of keep it quiet for now. I also didn't want them talking to me loudly about it to where other people then maybe figured it out. And then I had to talk to them. You know how all that goes. And so then once I finally figured it all out, I had sent them another text and that we had lost the baby so that they would know. And all of them that knew were very kind, but most didn't know. But I will say that if no one had known, it would have been awful. Those first church services, singing and stuff like that, I would just, you would feel the tears coming. There's nothing you can do. It was very hard. And had no one known, I would have felt so alone. And so, as a follow up to whether you should tell people, I think I might have talked about that in the other episode. I will say that I think you should, because if you don't, you walk through it alone. And is it awful to tell people what's happening? Yeah, it's awful. But you have their prayers. And when they see you, when it's happening, they don't just expect you to be normal all you. They love you. It's funny, there's one guy at church in particular that we pick on each other hard. Joke on each other hard. It's just kind of like a thing we always have because we have similar personalities. And even he has been so kind, and we've kind of put off the banter for a while. Um, and I don't know how I would have reacted because while I joke a lot, I'm also very snarky and I'm sarcastic. And so, had people not known and had they expected me to be my normal self, I think I wouldn't have handled it well. And so, I'm thankful that I had told when I had told, so that they knew, even though it felt like just as soon as I got to tell them happy news, I had to tell them sad news. And that, I mean, that's basically what it was. Um, I was so glad that I had. And yeah, I think you should. And like the first person I told outside of my well, not my outside of my family, outside of my nuclear family. Actually, I don't even think I told my kids yet at this point. I think I'd only told my husband. I had gone to an event for homeschooling with some people that I know well. Not like a big, huge homeschooling conference, but a small one with lots of people that I know well from various places. And I told a few of them there. And but it was interesting because I had to tell them when I told them, I said, all right, I'm going to tell you something, but I need you to not react too big because I didn't want to tell everybody. I mean, this was like, let's see, that was March the, I don't know, first or second or something like that. Um, and so I didn't want them to be like, ah, that's so cool, you know? So I told them to not be very excited about it. And so they weren't. They respected that. And I mean, they gave me hugs and we talked quietly about it, but there wasn't like this overly like jubilistic, whatever. I don't know what word I was about to say, but like the overwhelming joy or whatever. But then on my way home from that conference, I stopped to see my sister who lives in Louisville, Kentucky. And when I told her, she was in the, we had a, she didn't know why I was doing this, but I needed her. We were going to eat before I left to go back home. And I got her to ride with me and make her husband take the kids in a car separate. And she didn't know what I was trying to do there. It was like a short drive. So she just, it was like seen as no big deal, but I needed her in the car so I could give her this news. And when I told her, she screamed and hollered and was so excited. And it was so good for me. It was so fun. It was going to be so fun because she has a baby who was born in November. And so right about the time, by the way, my due date, I didn't say this earlier, my due date was supposed to be November the 4th, which would have been excuse me, my guest date. Y'all know what I mean. It would have been my grandmother's birthday had the baby been born on its due date. Now it probably wouldn't have been. I always carry late, but yeah, it was the due date was my grandmother's birthday, and she was one of my favorite people in the whole world. So that was pretty cool. But that put me at having the baby when her baby was about a year old. And so she was going to like basically offload all her stuff because obviously my youngest is 7. I'd gotten rid of everything. So we were so excited because she was just going to give me all kinds of stuff. And I wasn't going to have to go spend a whole bunch of money and all that. And so it was really exciting. And she was so excited for me. And so it was very fitting that she was already planning to come see us and she was there. And it kind of, it helped me through having her there right when it kind of all came to fruition and everything. Even though she had her kids there and it was a lot going on and everything, just having somebody there that understood. And she had also had a miscarriage before. So she, knew what it was like. So, I don't really know how to wrap this up, other than to say I hope that my story helps you, and to say I want you to stay tuned for next week because this chain of events, even in the midst of it, has changed something about my practice and about how I think about a few things. And I want to tell you about them and then and help you. Maybe if you're anywhere near me, I hope maybe it'll be a help for you someday. But I have walked through things firsthand, and I know what some things are like now. I know what the medical bill situation is like now for something in your darkest hour, and now you have to live through some junk, honestly. And I'm going to walk you through what a racket that is, um, and then tell you what I've changed and all that kind of stuff. So come back next week so I can explain these things to you, and tell you what I've done since then, because this has kind of happened fast. But from those changes at the end of March through now is I'm recording this on May 16th. It's been a month and a half, and I've already taken big steps and completed training and done all kinds of stuff. So I want you to come back and hear about it because it might be helpful for you or for somebody else that you know who might be not too far from me. Okay. So with that, I'll go ahead and end this episode and ask you to come back and join me next week. I know this wasn't a fun one, but hopefully it was a helpful one for you. It was a real life one. And there's no telling what I've forgotten to share that I meant to. I'm sure that's a lot because, like I said, I didn't have really good notes. I just jotted a few things down. But come back next week and we're going to talk about what this has meant for my practice and what it could mean for you or for someone you love in the future. Okay? Y'all have a great day, and I'll see you back here next week.
Real quick, if today's episode blessed you in any way, would you head over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a quick 5-star written review? It'll take you less than a minute, but it's the best thank you can give me. And it will help my show to reach more mamas just like you so we can all find God's best for our families. I'll see you right back here in a few days.